Hello, live stream. My name is Stubbings. I'm an animation artist, or motion designer, or director, whatever you want to call it. I am working out of Zurich, Switzerland. I started out as a graphic designer many years ago, and I had the opportunity to get into animation while doing an internship at a local TV station. At this point, I noticed animation is the thing I want to do, so I've been doing it ever since. Today I do mostly commercial work. Lately a lot of character-based stuff, and I absolutely love character design and animation. It's fantastic. This is a project I've done a few years ago. It's a commercial for Nestlé France. It's very stylized, very graphic novel-y. It's quite old already, but I think the style still holds up. It's timeless because it's not based on a render technology, so it ages a lot less. This is just a cut down. The real spot is a lot longer. This more recent work, it's a mascot for a supermarket chain, very contemporary in the style. Yeah, so besides commercial projects, I also always try to find some time to do personal projects. This is my own island. It's called Stubbings. By the way, this and the following piece, The Spooky House, it's all done with procedural textures, so not a single pixel texture used, apart from the painted clouds in the background. Everything else, the bricks, the ground, the rock, it's everything procedural noises in Cinema 4D. It doesn't always have to be cartoony. Sometimes I try out stuff like this. This is, by the way, way out of my comfort zone. I usually don't do photorealistic stuff. But I recently bought Octane, and I just challenged myself and tried to do something really, really difficult, like food. And I think it kind of worked out great. Anybody hungry? No? Yeah, okay. So it's 3D if you don't believe it. There's also fries coming with that, if you like. And yeah, I think aliens and fast food are a really interesting combination. So besides all these small tests, small projects which are essentially just like tests and experiments, I always try to find some time to do some animated short films. The one on the left, Stopover, was completed a few years ago, like 6 years ago already. And the one on the right, Sunday, I'm working on right now. Actually, I wanted it to finish, to have it finished this year, but I was held up by presentation at software booths. So today I'm here to talk about TRUCKIN. This actually is a commissioned piece, commercial work, if you like, but it felt like a personal project, and I'll tell you why in a second. It's for Freitag, a Swiss brand that makes bags out of used truck tarps. Anybody have a Freitag bag? No, 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 okay. Here's one you can win afterwards. So let's just have a look at the movie.
Now this here yarn I'm about to spin concerns these two brothers at their little ranch way out there in the countryside. But this ain't no ordinary ranch. You won't find cows or chickens here, so there ain't no milking and you have to get your eggs elsewhere. Because them two brothers, they've been truckers their whole lives. Out there on the roads, rumbling along with the tumbling tumbleweeds all over this here continent. They lived their life on the road, but they always had a dream of something bigger. And it wasn't a beach chair lounging, if you know what I mean. Nope, too much diesel in the veins for that. So when it was time to take that final off-ramp into the sunset, they knew where they was headed. Found themselves a ranch and took to raising the next generation of trucks. That's right, they're raising trucks. Because after a lifetime of driving cargo, they knew all about what it takes to raise them little trucklets. Getting up at dawn to run them, feeding them right, tucking them in at night. They had the love and dedication needed to raise them upright. And it ain't no short haul neither. You see, it's a jungle out there on the roads of Europea land, and if a trucker's wheels are still wobbly, he'll end up in the dusty ditch. So you gotta train them hard and really teach them how to haul. And then one day, that thunderous thumping in their big diesel hearts is just too much to hold back. You point the little guy toward the highway and let him roam free. Let him find his own way on the frontier. He takes on a job at a renowned shipping company, packing cargo, logisticating. He'll wrangle all the great roads, from the icy flatlands of the north, up and over the jagged Alps and down to the hot and cobbled streets of the Southland. Kilometer after kilometer spent perpetuating this here economy, delivering the things we need to live life day to day. Until after years of hard work, it's time to exit the old Autobahn. The truck returns home to the place he was raised. Now, the boys, they welcome the trucks home with open arms. They unhitch those trailers one last time and pull those beautifully weathered tarps off for one last cleaning. While the truck puts up his proverbial feet, the boys get to work, scrubbing off all the grit and grime while preserving that pretty patina. The cleaned up tarps are taken to the old design barn where they're sliced up just right, so every bag will be unique and just as purty as can be. Finally, it's off to the old sewing machine, which stitches up a yarn even more perplexing than this one. And there she is, a newborn bag with a history all her own. But that's about where our tale comes to an end. I sure hope you enjoyed our little journey meeting the brothers and their little trucklets. If it helps you enjoy and appreciate your fry tuck bag even more, well then, my work here is done. But wait, I can hear you noodling. Where do them cute little trucklets come from? Well, my friend, that is a story for another time. So have fun and keep on trucking, partner.
Great sound design. Thank you. So those of you that work in commercials say, wait, what? Why would a client approve of something like that? Well, the thing is, they didn't. Well, more or less, there was no brief at all. The way it came to this is the guys at Freitag, they sat together with me pretty early in the process because they wanted to do a series of animated films about the production process of Freitag bags, because the production process is very unique. We'll get to that later. And we were brainstorming about how we could illustrate this in a new and innovative way. We didn't want to go the explainer way, where you have an explainer, a classical graphic explainer, please, which is also popular today. So we came to the conclusion we wanted to have 5 different artists. Each one creates one film. We'll show the artists the production process, but we'll give them full artistic freedom, and we'll call the whole thing Tarte Blanche. So TRUCKIN is just one of 5 movies about the same topic. You can watch all the other great movies which look completely different and a completely different story at freitag.ch, Tarte Blanche. Wrong slide. So at the end, this was more or less the brief. All that's important is that at the beginning there is a truck tarp, and at the end there is a bag. How the story is told is entirely up to the artist, and all we want are some unique, surprising, funny, and most of all, entertaining stories. So to understand the real Freitag story, I just go over it really quick. Those are the Freitag brothers. Back in 1993, they were unhappy with the offering of bags on the market, so they created their own bag from a used truck because it was water repellent and very durable. This is one of the first bags which they have made in their shared apartment in Zurich. This one in particular is on display at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So they definitely have made it. Today, they have flagship stores all over the globe. This is the one in Zurich. It's built from old shipping containers, and actually you can go all the way to the top and check out the skyline of Zurich. They have hundreds of resellers, of course, but their production process is more or less the same. They still use only used truck tarps, no new materials used. They use old safety belts, car seat belts, and bicycle inner tubes for other stuff. So yeah, it's pretty unique. Those are the brothers today. Note this guy with the beard. And the production process is something like this. They try to find really nice tarps all over Europe. They have some specialists that are hired only to hunt down the really great tarps, and they have to be used. So all of these most of these tarps have been on the road for 10 plus years or so. So afterwards, they cut off all the excess unusable stuff like straps and metal things and hose or whatever, and they clean it with big washing machines, and they use water they have collected on the roof of their factory. So they don't use regular tap water, it's reclaimed water. And then the most important process is the designing of the bag. So she's a bag designer, and she has a stencil, and she looks for the interesting parts of the tarp, and she cuts them out. So she sees, this is similar, what's in front of the bag, also what's inside and the back. And of course, finally, they sew together to have the final product. So to understand how I made this story, you have to understand how I approach commissioned work versus personal projects. So usually with commissioned work, like commercial projects, it's a process like most of you know, it's like idea, concept, design, storyboard, animatic, animation, compositing, delivery, and finally beer. So this is the most, like, the best case. But usually, of course, there's revisions, 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 changes, a file name called version 78, new final version 2. Feedback like, I don't know, just different. Postponed, more lens flare, postponed delivery dates, added kittens, and bigger logos. So everybody knows this. It's fine. It's our daily work. But if you do a personal project, at least when I do a personal project, it's usually just beer, idea, make movie. So, for instance, my short film Stopover, usually my personal projects just start with a situation or an idea, more like a situation. And this short film Stopover, I had the idea while I was on vacation on a road trip, and I was facing a similar problem as the hero in the movie. I was dying for a pit stop, and I wondered, okay, this is a no-brainer while you're traveling on the surface, but if you're in outer space in a very small spacecraft, how do you do it? So the way I approach personal projects is, you all know the idea when you have an idea and you're just shilly-shallying about, I don't know if it's a good idea, is this the right style, do people like it, and it's just all yay procrastination, and I'll just do it. Of course, I don't start a new project with every stupid idea I have, but once I have worked out a pretty good idea in my head, I just like dig in and start doing it. So usually I don't have a storyboard, hardly any sketches. I just go straight at it. So here, the initial idea was based on the real story of the Freitag brothers. I wanted to have the brothers in there. I wanted to have the whole production process in there. But I wanted also to put more emphasis on the trucks, because that's what their products are made of. So the logline would be 2 retired truckers, the brothers, breed and raise trucks on the farm and turn their tarps into products. So first of all, without even knowing the complete story, without even having a complete storyboard, I just started with the truckers. This is actually an idea that precedes the TRUCKIN process, because I was sitting down with a friend who works at Freitag, and we were talking about if it would be feasible to have a mascot for the brand. And of course, the mascot for a brand like Freitag, it had to be a trucker. So the next day I sat down in Illustrator and made those two guys, which stand for the brothers, of course, those truckers. And they sat on my desktop for a while, didn't do anything with them, because it was like 2 years ago. Eventually, I built one of them in 3D, and because at that point, just when I bought Octane, I tried out the Octane subsurface scattering stuff to see how it works in a cartoony style. And then he sat on my desktop again for a while because I was caught up in other commercial projects. I used him for some other tests, like this guy, trying out different styles. So eventually this project came along, and I finally could use him for what he was intended for. And now he's back in black and white, because I had the feeling that, for once, I always wanted to do a black and white project, and it's really hard to pitch a black and white project to a commercial client because, hey, we have Farbfernsehen, and we wanted to have it in color. So this was one opportunity to use a black and white style. Also, I really like the. This guy has a loud voice. Also, I'm very influenced by the old cartoons, the old American cartoons, and really like the style of the 30s cartoons. So these are all black and white. And the third reason being that those bags, they come out real nice if you put it in front of a black and white background. I'll talk about the shading and lighting style a little later. So here's one of the characters, and note that I always try to be very low poly. For one thing, it makes the look really reduced and graphic, and for another thing, it makes the rigs to work with really nice, fast, and snappy. Here's the trucks. This is the baby truck. Very simple geometry as well. This is the older one. Let's call him a teenage truck. Based on the baby truck form, note that he has an additional set of wheels and a different face. And this is the full-grown adult truck with another set of wheels and a completely different look based on the same thing. But it's really simple geometry, and it all comes out with the textures, which are super graphic, drawn in Illustrator, and taken in a Photoshop. Actually, I used to work on a Mac, and I could use Illustrator files directly in Cinema 4D. It no longer works on a PC, strangely. So I have to go via Photoshop, but that's fine. You can add some more stuff in Photoshop if you like. So this is the texture for the full-grown adult truck. So now with all the characters done, let's start with the sets. First did a style frame. And I like to design directly in Cinema 4D. I use it a lot like I use Illustrator. I just like take rough, simple shapes and throw them together to create a world. It's very messy. This is second one. It's the training course, or the fun park, which is, I think, an essential part of the storyline. So while I was still figuring out the complete story, I knew I had to do some sets. So I started with the home base, which also gave me the opportunity to get a feeling for the world the characters were living in. So I first created the farm and then worked myself outwards. So this is more environment. Then going outward from this. I use cinema more or less like I would play with a Lego set. I just like take assets and stick them together. You see how these there are just shapes like just stuck in together. And if I need another asset, like another tree, an additional tree, some rocks, I just model them on the spot. Looks like this. As I said, very messy. Looks like this through the camera. It's fine. So when you're working like this on a very super simple reduced geometry, it's also important to simultaneously create the textures. And I did this again in Illustrator. I just had some really simple forms. This is some swirly stuff for the tree leaves, gravel for the roads, wood, of course, planks, concrete, and whatnot. So if you look at those trees, essentially they're nothing else. They're just like, take this tree, for instance. It's just like 3 cones and some metaballed spheres. This is even more reduced. It's 2 cones, 3 spheres, 3 distorted spheres, and lots of texture, and very simple lighting. So I only use, for the whole project, I only used, like, there's 1 single light source. That's it, nothing more. This is the environment rendered and composed. And I also use a lot of Cinema 4D noises because they're very versatile and you can use them for a wide range of applications. For instance, here you see the ground. It's breaking up by some like swirly, wavy forms. So it's a little more interesting to look at. If it was just like plain gray, it would be a little bit boring. So that's just noise, more or less. And I use noises for a wide range of applications. For instance, this is a gradient overlaid with a noise on a very high contrast setting. But for this project, it was a little bit too blobby and a little bit too messy. So I loaded up into Illustrator and image traced it to get rid of the blobs and have more straight and graphic lines. This is better. Still not good enough for my application, so I further simplified the path with the simplified path tool in Illustrator, and now it's only straight lines. No curves at all, just straight and jaggy lines. So after a little of cleanup, it looks like this. And if you slap it on some really messy geometry like this mountain range, you get this. A very graphic, stylized mountain range with snow caps. So if you compare it, very simple geometry, messy, very simple textures, but it makes a great look. And if I had done this in Illustrator, I probably would have taken me way longer to get a really nice look in Illustrator than if I would have done it in Cinema 4D. So this thing is a piece of very important geometry. I call it the lump. And it's like a primitive for me. I use it all the time. For instance, my short stopover, it's used to create the asteroid belt. In the island, it's used to create the rock. And in my current short film, Sunday, it's used to create the icebergs in the South Pole. So, okay, another example, the Italian beach town. Again, very simple geometry, just more or less cubes, subdivided cubes, some cloners for the roof, and then, of course, noise, procedural textures. The bricks are all procedural textures, so the bricks are tiles with an overlaid noise to break it up. So if you would have like bricks all through, it wouldn't be as interesting as if you don't break it up. And because it's procedural, you don't have much repetitions as well. So, and there's of course, another stacked texture with just the windows and stuff also done in Illustrator. Yeah, and that's a layer shader, and I use it pretty much, probably 99% of my Cinema 4D materials. Oh, and by the way, this is all like standard renderer. It's no physical renderer, no GPU stuff. It's the old standard render. And I hope that you never ever get rid of it. Maxon, never ever get rid of the standard render, please. So, to break it up a little, I also added a displacer to make it a bit more jaggy. You notice it mostly on the roof, on the straight lines. Whoops. Yep. So if you look at the scene, this really quickly put together, like with the few objects. If you look at it from the top, you see that I also use some FFDs, really messy as well. But it's they're used just to break up the straight lines, to have it a little bit crooked, so it looks more cartoony. If you look at it from the back, you really see that it's really pretty simple, very messy, but it works. If you look at that, it's perfectly fine. So shading and lighting style, as I said, I only use one single light source, and the look mostly comes from, this is the editor light. The look, of course, mostly comes from the textures. Yeah, so the textures look like this. It's a combination of Photoshop and Illustrator. And yeah, so I often use, for this style, I often use just an environment object at like 75% probably, just to have a basic ambient light. Gives you already a very super, like almost illustratory look. So just add one light source and you're pretty much done. I also added some slight ambient occlusion. Yeah, you can see it, just to give it a little bit more like a 3D look or plasticity. And as a special, and I think this is very crucial for the look, there's this rim light. And this rim light isn't done with a light source, it's shader based. So it's what it is, it's just a Fresnel shader on a very a small range setting, and it's been masked out by a Lumos shader, so it only affects the parts of the geometry that are within the light source. So on the shadow parts, it doesn't affect it. It's only on the light side, on the light side of life. So it doesn't matter where your light source is, if it's from the left or from the right, you always get that line, which makes it very cartoony. Even if you have a light from the very front, you still have that nice rim light without having to handle several light sources. It's just still one infinite light with hard ray traced shadows. So what this means for the environment, this is the scene in the editor light with the environment object, and then added the light source, the infinite light. Add some slight ambient occlusion, and you're done. So this is the beauty path, more or less. And we go into compositing. Compositing is done in After Effects. This is the beauty path again. We'll add the background. This is the mountains are always added in post. So I export just the cameras, more or less, and the null object where I want to have the mountains, because it's way easier to scale the mountain in post, to composite the mountain in post, so the scaling is right. Otherwise, you would have to always render it in Cinema 4D, and it's much easier to have slap it in After Effects. Add some slight haze to give it more depth. Use the depth path to add even more haze and more depth to the landscape. And this is a very important step to achieve the look I was going for. It's very subtle, but if you notice like the straight lines, the thing that computers are able to do is to be perfect. They just render out like perfect lines. It's straight everywhere. It's way too perfect if you want to give it an illustrative or a hand-drawn look. So I have my layering technique in After Effects to break up the straight lines. You see it here. It gets a little bit jaggy. It bleeds out in certain places, and it's very subtle. Probably you wouldn't notice if I wouldn't tell you, but it's something I think it's you perceive it on a very sublime basis. So you have the feeling of it being analog while it's not, of course. There's some slight color correction to give it a vintage look, vignette, and finally some grain and dust to add more of the vintage look. So for animation, quickly switch over to Cinema 4D. Let's quickly open the rig. Sorry, I'm unprepared. Where's this stuff? Rigs, here. So the trucker rigs, usually what I do if I have a commercial project, I'll build the character and give it to a rigger. In most of the cases, it's Clément, a good friend of mine from France. He does some outstanding rigs, and it's a dream to work with him. But for stuff where I don't have any budget to pay anybody else but me, I'll just do the rigs myself. And I use the character object. Thankfully, it's very easy to set up. What the good thing about the character object is that once you've done your joints and everything, you can always go back if you notice that somehow the shoulder joint is in the wrong place. You can go back and adjust it. And that's one thing that's very hard to do if you build a rig from scratch. And you just have to go and turn off tags and stuff. And this is very straightforward. Of course, the big thing about rigging, for me at least, I feel, is the weight painting. And as long as it's like skinny thin here, it's not a problem. But if it gets a little thicker like here, you'll run into problems. And the outer wader does a pretty good job for all the skinny stuff, but you're going to be painting a few hours if you have some thicker characters. But yeah, it's a better way. It saved a lot of time and saved a lot of headaches. So the baby trucks or the trucks essentially are a very super simple rig because I wanted to avoid to build a full-blown rig for every instance of the truck, because there's 3 instances of trucks. So what I did was I would just have a joint chain, which deforms an FFD with 3 controllers, and the way it works, you just can have those 3 controllers to move this stuff. Of course, if you look at the adult truck. So if he goes around the bend, he goes like this. Of course, that's not how a real truck behaves, but hey, it's a cartoon. So yeah, it was really easy to take this FFD setup and slap it onto the bigger instances of the trucks. It's just a no-brainer. If I had like skinned and jointed everything in the truck, I would have had to set up at 3 times. So this is a very simple way to do this. And the way I did the animation of the trucks driving or riding, it's just an align to spline animation, more or less. I could just extract the splines from the geometry because you already have a spline for these sweep NURBS that makes the loop, of course. So it was very easy to have just the spline and have the object ride along the spline. Also, as you see, there's some FFDs to like cartoony distort the object while he goes around the loop. Same story here, but the interesting thing here was there's also an FFD deforming this stuff. Somehow, for some reason, if you have an align to spline animation and the spline is within the FFD, it does not distort. So this made me some headaches. But the way I solved this is if you have just one single clone on a cloner and the clone clones onto a spline, and you animate the offset pretty much the same way as you would animate the align to spline animation. The spline is able to distort when it's in an FFD. So luckily, this worked. Has some lag here. Yeah, okay. But there's some problems with the align to spline if the truck goes over a hill like that. So this works here. But if you look at it from the side, if you have like a regular align to spline tag on the truck, and usually, I say usually, you want to have the pivot point of the align to spline animation on the back axis. It makes it a little more realistic. But if it goes up onto a hill, of course, it will break through the geometry or break through the spline because, of course, it only has one contact point, and a car more or less has 2 contact points. So even if you like try to, okay, I'll just move the pivot point to the middle of the car, you'll have a similar problem. It still breaks through. So what I did was I had a, where are you? Here. I had a second null object here. Yeah, you get it. It's here. And have like this null object point at the second one. So this null object with a little espresso precedes this point on the spline, and if you point at it, if you would take the right null object here, so if you point at it, no, this one, yeah. So if you point at it, it works. It stays on the spline. Of course, it's not perfect, and probably if you do like a super photorealistic car commercial, this setup won't work. But at that point, you'd have a sophisticated car rig, anyways. So yeah. that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions? No? So if you want to win one of these bags in a raffle, just fill out one of the cards, stick it into the box, and with a little luck, you might win one of those. Very expensive bag. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks for listening. Go to my website, ask me some questions here on the booth. Thanks.